Okay,
Thanks.
you're good to go.
Okay, let's begin the meeting. The October 25th, 2021 Lehigh County Authority Board of Directors meeting is now called to order. This meeting is being held in a hybrid fashion with board members and public and staff both present and online using the Zoom interface. We all should have received our packets in advance, a hard copy to the board and also electronically, and that information is also available on our website. All right, let's have a roll call of board first, staff, and then public.
Okay. So the roll call of the board: Brian Noggle.
Here.
Scott Bieber.
Here.
Richard Bonner.
Here.
Norma Cusick.
Here.
Ed Lyons.
Here.
Kevin Baker.
Present.
Linda Rosenfeld.
Here.
Chuck Morgan.
Here.
Family.
Present.
All right, we have 9 board members present. We have our solicitor, Mike Gall from Kings Fry, present. And staff, in addition to myself, Liesl Gross, we have Ed Klein, John Parsons, Chuck Volk, Susan Sampson, Phil DePoe, Lisa Miller, and Todd Marion. So we also have some public members of the public here. We have Jenny McKenna and Ryan Chamberlain from the City of Allentown. Amanda Schumacher from Borton Lawson is on the call. And Herb Higginbotham and Mason Beck from HDR are here.
It sounds like Niagara Falls.
Oh, wow. Take a quick
Take a little break here while we
quick
get
sound check break.
Are you on the right channel?
Or check the other one on the top there. Just going to try a different headset for Dick.
Okay, try something different. Oh, you can hear it from
I
there.
think the
See if that works any better.
is it not? I'll do the best I can.
Okay.
Does it work? What didn't I do?
I hit seek and then it'll switch to a different channel.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, let's give that a try.
It's good.
All right. Right. Back to it.
Okay.
All right, so at this time, we're going to review the agenda and then the need for executive session.
Today, there are no changes to the agenda and no executive sessions planned.
All right, thank you very much. Now move to the approval of the minutes from the October 11th, 2021 meeting.
I'd like to make a motion that we accept the minutes as published for the October 11th meeting.
A motion by Dick and seconded by Amir to approve the minutes as written. Any questions? All in favor, say aye.
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 You opposed? All right, ayes have it. Ed and Kevin were not present during that meeting, so should reflect that, I guess. Attentions. Okay, moving on to
It screeches.
public comments. At this time, we open up the floor to any public comments on any items that are not on the agenda. Are there any public comments?
Thank you.
I don't have any, Brian.
Thank you, Brian. Okay, now we move on to action discussion items. The only topic we have for action discussion is the request for approval of the 2022 budget review. It's the blue documents that were received by the board. It is the digital package, pages 8 through 13. This is the fourth time that this is being addressed, this issue.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Chairman. We do have a brief presentation that is repetitive a little bit of what we've talked about before, but we thought for the final review, we should go over some of the key highlights. And what you have attached to the board packet is the executive summary that slips into the book, and nothing else in the book that was previously presented to you has changed since the last time we reviewed it. So just to put that in context, I'm going to go ahead and share our screen so we can get into the overview. So today we are seeking approval of our 2022 proposed budget. And as Brian mentioned, this is the fourth time we're talking about budget over the past couple of months. The budget process actually starts in July each year with staff discussion, reviewing assumptions and wishes and initiatives for the following year. And then we move into board discussion, preliminary review. At our last meeting, we had a fairly lengthy discussion about rates as well as staffing. And then today we're seeking approval. What comes after that will be review and adoption of the rates that are the basis of this year's budget, and then the tapping fees in December. That's where we are right now. So Ed can go ahead and give us a financial summary of the budget, and then I'll go into some of the key things that we talked about during the budget process.
Okay, so I'll try to cover this quickly since nothing really changed. I think what sticks out at me on the budget 2022 column is the fact that all three funds, suburban water, suburban wastewater, and city division, are now on the positive side with respect to net income. We think we're going to finish the year this way on the positive side too. And the budget for 2021 had, I'll call it slightly lower numbers, but we thought we were going to finish budgeted 2021 with all three funds on the positive side too. In total, LCA is like $6.1 million given the three funds. So that's up compared to the forecast in 2021, and the forecast was also up to budget as well. So I guess I'm saying nice positive trend with respect to being above zero and going upward with respect to budgets, forecasts, and where we are in 2022. And actually better than 2020 as well. That finished at 1.1 negative, and so you got a $7 million swing from where we were in 2020. Cash flows, again, pretty much the same news. We're going to be positive across all three funds. The forecast for suburban water was negative, but wastewater and city division we're forecasting are going to be well above zero on the positive side. Quite frankly, the total LCA, $10.2 million compared to a forecast of 5.7 in total. And I'm looking at the total line against the budget of $3.5 million. So again, the same thing. The forecast is better than the 2021 budget, and the 2022 budget is expected to come in above what we forecast 2021, and swung the other way as compared to 2020. That was negative. So you almost got a $11 million swing there plus. Good news on debt service coverage ratios, all three 2.01, 10.82, and 1.86 are obviously better than the target of 1.20 and covers all the indenture requirements. They're up except for suburban wastewater, where that's down a little bit to where we think we're finishing this year. But the city division is going to be up compared to the forecast. And so city is up across the board from 2020 to 21 and in 22. Wastewater, like I said, they were at 11.95 back in 2020, but not much to worry about. It's when you're up above 10. And suburban water is actually going to hit 2.01 with some of the rate effects that we are talking about and are in the budget. Actually, we struggled in the budget of 2021 to get to 1.20, and now it's swinging to 2.01. Capital spending, I'm just looking at the total there. We're going to spend almost $20 million. That's a couple $1 million higher than 16 that we are forecasting for 2021. Pretty much as you compare it to forecasts, cities up, suburban wastewater is going to be down a little bit, and that's a number of projects for the 537 plan are still out there to be approved and pending. City division, again, up by $3 million. We have like a $4 million swing, $3 million swing in total capital spending compared to the forecast. And that's also a couple $1 million higher than what we budgeted in 2021. So instead of going through all the numbers, we'll just touch about the debt service coverage ratio again, 2.01. 10.82 and 1.86. So overall, LCA is 2.23. In terms of all the capital spending that we just talked about, you can see suburban waters getting some effect from operating current cash flows, I'll call it, and we're also going to borrow $3.1 million. Suburban wastewater is actually all coming from current cash flows. City division is going to get a combination of $5.9 million from current cash flows. We'll use up $4.2 million worth of existing project reserves that are on the books, in the $1.2 million of PennVest funding on the VFDs that got carried over from this year. So multiple sources there for the city. In terms of total cash flow, the fund balance is going to end, was starting the year at 14.7. We're going to finish 15.1. So I believe that's like $400 some thousand of net cash flow going on the books. On suburban wastewater, we started at 18.2. We are going to finish with 22.5. And the number that I'm talking about here includes, I'll call it cash plus any investments that are out there. And in suburban water, you could see that $8.8 million worth of, I'll call it restricted cash and plus investments. Suburban wastewater, we're going to have about $6.7 million. So the net cash flow will be in the neighborhood of $3.4 million, $4 million on suburban wastewater. And the city is going to have almost $5 million worth of cash flow coming in to take it from 64.5 coming in to almost 70 million, with about $55 million worth of restricted cash balances. There are no investments left in the city. Just in terms of days cash on hand, when you start to add cash and investments that are sitting out there that I just talked about, suburban water will be 209, wastewater 372, city division 208, and total of 269. So all of that is well above the 180 days that we like to have in reserves. With project reserves, in the neighborhood of $3 million for water, 8.7, and city division will kind of stay where it is at the beginning of the year because of the use of the cash flows and reserves.
So that's the high level financial summary of the budget. The budget document itself includes lots of details by fund to go through if we spent some time on that. I just want to spend a few minutes talking about some of the key highlights of the budget in terms of what's included, what we hope to accomplish in 2022, and it falls into really 4 categories of strategic plan kickoff, staffing, capacity planning, and rate impacts. So start with the strategic plan because that's been an ongoing effort for 2021, working toward developing our 2022 through 2027 strategic plan and our initiatives for the next several years. Gathering this time around with the strategic plan, we gather a lot of feedback from board, employees, stakeholders to really help us understand what we should be focusing on in the years ahead. And I've listed some of the highlights that came from those discussions. Continuous improvement, asset management, employee development, lots of areas for us to be focused on. So one highlight I wanted to share with you about the strategic plan is really a focus for our staff and for our organization is to simplify our message and really get focused on what we're here to accomplish as an organization. And you can see that really visually here on the screen when we look at our prior mission statement. That was a pretty lengthy and detailed statement of what we do and trying to capture how we do it. So it's not a bad mission statement, it's just very, very detailed. And what we wanted to create with this new process, with the strategic plan, is to create something that is very inspiring and impactful and clear about what LCA is here to do, and to be very succinct about that. So our simplified mission statement for looking ahead for the future is that LCA is here very simply to protect public health and the environment by providing high quality, safe and reliable water and wastewater services. By really capturing the essence of what we do, we hope that will translate into the strategies that support this mission. And I wanted to highlight this for a couple reasons, because it's part of our strategic planning process, but also just to look back a couple of days, we celebrated the Imagine a Day Without Water last week, which was a campaign put on by the US Water Alliance, in which we talk about what it would be like if we didn't have water for a day. If you could imagine not being able to brush your teeth, flush the toilet, go to the hospital, fight a fire, all these things that make what we do so important, so essential for the community. And that really speaks to the heart of what we're here for as an organization. Just wanted to share that resource with you and that little bit of inspiration for, I hope, the board and our employees. So coming out of the strategic plan, we will have, in addition to our simplified mission statement, we will have a clarified vision statement, an updated statement of values. We're developing our top priorities. Flowing down from those priorities, we'll have strategies and activities and metrics. A lot of detail. We're going to go into more discussion of that in the November-December timeframe, but I wanted to share this with you to give you the idea of the scope that we're putting into the next 5 years of strategic initiatives. There's a lot of work to be done, and we're excited about getting started. For us to get started in some of those key areas, we are seeking support for some of those priorities in our 2022 budget, and specifically the staffing changes that are included. We talked about these at some length at the last meeting. I wanted to share them with you again, that they are included in the budget proposal. So staffing for employee development, process improvement, and asset management, 3 positions, 1 for each area. And the budget impact shown here, but as we talked about last time, these positions are still in a somewhat early stage of being refined and defined. So we're asking for them to be included in the budget so that we have the resource to continue that process. One area we didn't spend a lot of time in the last couple of meetings talking about, but I think is worth capturing here, is the work that's going into capacity planning. This was captured actually in our very first discussion with the board about the capital budgets and some of the key projects that are included there. And really wanted to make sure the board is aware that we have capacity planning as a key component of our capital budgets for 2022. In particular, 3 studies or planning initiatives, one related to the regional sewage facilities plan, the Act 537 work that Phil DePoe reports to you on a regular basis. We also need to complete an update to the master plan for the water filtration plant in Allentown. And we also need to complete a water supply study for our suburban division so that we understand where water supply is coming from to meet the future needs of the growing portions of our service area. And then there's a number of related capital improvements that are included in the plan, mostly in the design phase at this point, but some upgrades to the Kleins Island wastewater plant. Filter upgrades at the water filtration plant will be in design phase next year. And then the Trexlertown Interceptor bottleneck project, the project to solve that problem, will be in design phase next year as well. So these are all very key components of the capital program for 2022 included in the budget. And then the last item we spoke about some length last time was rate impact for 2022. We didn't really talk about the Allentown rates because the Allentown rates follow the terms of the lease agreement that we have with Allentown. We updated that lease agreement in 2020, and so the rates are increasing in 2022 according to the new terms of the updated lease agreement. The impact in 2022 will be about $99 per year for an average residential customer, and that's for water and sewer combined in Allentown. We talked about suburban water rates increasing in 2022, and the key drivers for that being the increased cost to purchase water for the system, as well as the inclusion, and probably most significantly, the inclusion of more pay-as-you-go capital into the rate base so that we reduce our future need to borrow. Those rate impacts will result in an increase of about $75 per year for an average residential customer for water in our suburban water division. And then suburban wastewater rates, there's no increase in the rates that we charge directly to our customers proposed in the budget. However, at the last meeting, Jennifer Montero did review the pass-through charges that go to the sewer signatories, and that results in an increase of about 2% there. So all of those rates are captured within the budget proposal that's in front of you today. And I just wanted to share, because we had the Imagine a Day Without Water, talking about the Value of Water campaign. There's some good information that is generated by the U.S. Water Alliance I wanted to share with you. They do an annual survey called the Value of Water Index. And one of their most recent results shows this particular one. I thought was interesting that 80% of voters that they survey say that their water service is affordable, and the majority of voters would be willing to pay more to fund improved service. So I think in general, the public understands how important it is what we do, and that sometimes there's a cost that goes to providing that service.
Lisa,
Yes.
do we know where that area was that they surveyed for that 80%?
It's a national survey.
Okay.
Yeah, but I don't know the size of the survey pool. It's a national organization, and they do a national survey every year.
Okay.
Thanks, Linda. The graph that's shown on the screen now is one that we like to share every year when we're talking about rates, so we can understand how our rates compare to other communities in the Lehigh Valley. And in this graph, you can see the yellowish bars represent the core of LCA's service area. So the city of Allentown, and then the suburban communities, Lower Macungie Township, Upper Milford Township, and Upper Macungie Township. That's where most of our customers are in those four communities. The average water and sewer bill for average residential customer in those areas, about $700 for the suburban customers, about $800 a year for Allentown customers. And then you can see some other communities. And just to be clear, they probably should be highlighted yellow because they are our customers. We do have some smaller service areas in northern Lehigh County where the water and wastewater service is more expensive because these are very small remote rural systems that are expensive to maintain for a very small customer base. And then you can see on the far end of the chart some of the other communities in the Lehigh Valley where the rates are much higher than what we have today.
Hey, Lisa, Ted here.
Hi, Ted.
Question. Yeah, just looking at this, at the graph and the comparisons, if someone would just ask us off the top question, why is Bethlehem water rates cheaper than Allentown and Easton is higher? is there a simple, I know there isn't, but is there an explanation that one could give? Yeah.
There's a specific explanation for the city of Bethlehem, and that is that city of Bethlehem is under PUC jurisdiction, Pennsylvania Utility Commission jurisdiction. So they go for longer periods of time in between rate increases. They have a rate case in front of the PUC right now that they're waiting for a decision on. And so we'll likely see the Bethlehem rates jump and then stay the same, stay flat for a period of time while other communities catch up. Does that make sense, Ted?
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
I have a question.
Sure.
Just with regard to suburban LCA, what percentage is water versus sewer, at least in this chart, generally speaking?
I'd be guessing if I tried to answer that without the data. It's not half and half. In Allentown, I know the water is a significantly higher portion of the sewer, of the bill than the sewer, and it's flip-flopped for suburban. The sewer is a higher portion of the bill in suburban than the water, but specific details I don't have that in front of me. Sorry. So before we go into the final set of numbers, those are the key items that we talked about with the board in terms of strategic plan, staffing, some capital improvements and rates. And all of those items that I just reviewed pretty quickly are included in the budget proposal that is before us today. And Ed?
Before you go into the cash flow and that stuff, one of the issues that we talked about at length was with regard to the staffing.
Mm-hmm.
And we decided, I think we decided that we would put a placeholder in for the amount of money that you had requested for the 3 positions. And we were looking for more information to come back before they were actually going out and seeking actually filling those positions. We talked about, this is very important stuff because it was identified in the strategic plan. And the question became, well, are there other things that can be done to shift around the employees and to justify the additional cost? What's the benefit of hiring these people and adding to the overall payroll and benefits of that stuff? So we looking for coming back when you're ready to actually push those positions forward for more information that gives us more confidence about the benefit of those positions being added to the payroll. So that's the understanding we have. Right?
I think that's yes, sure. We can absolutely do that if that's what the board would like to do for these positions.
We're not talking about wholesale every time to do this, but
right.
Because we're adding to the budget, we're just looking for that.
I think we just want to make sure that we're clear on what the ask is, that it's an informational item, a presentation of what the position is going to address, and in more detail than we've done before. The board's looking for that as a report from staff prior to filling them.
From my perspective, hiring an asset management is absolutely essential. But the way that I look at asset management is very different from you, right? I don't have a JD, I don't have an organizational chart, I don't know the responsibility of the asset manager is going to have. So understanding of what role an asset manager is going to have and how your organizational chart is going to give that visibility and leadership to asset management, for me is essential to have that view.
We can absolutely have that discussion prior to filling those positions.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Want to hear about cash flows?
So if you don't, I mean, unless you want to go through every detail, I'm just going to touch on the highlights, I think, because nothing's really changed. So cash flows for suburban water will be a little bit better than 400,000. You can see up there that we are going to borrow $3.1 million. And as you look at some of the metrics below, the 1.25 operating ratio is better than forecast and actually better than the previous year budget. Debt service we've talked about. Capital coverage ratio, 0.57, about well, a little bit less than forecast. 2021, much higher than it was in the budget. And again, that reflects our desire to add a little bit more pay-go to the rate structure itself. Unrestricted cash on hand is 229. It's down a little bit from forecast, but certainly better than what we budgeted a year ago. And $2.5 million worth of unrestricted investment balance is still on the books yet. Suburban wastewater, $4.4 million net cash flow. Basically, the current cash flows in terms of operating revenues minus expenses is basically funding the capital of $2.9 million. Operating ratios are better than 1, so 1.10, actually better than forecast and actually better than last year's budget. Debt service coverage ratio, I think we've talked about enough. Capital coverage 2.52, that's good. That in fact, that's better than the forecast and better than what we budgeted. So that's capturing a substantial portion of capital and current cash flows. Unrestricted days cash on hand at almost 435 versus 2021 at 335 and 330 in the budget. And there are some balances in the wastewater side with respect to investments, and that's $6.4 million. And we used a little bit as compared to what we budgeted in 2021. City division, $5.4 million of net cash flow. And again, we are borrowing $1.2 million to fit Penvest into the picture on the VFDs. The operating ratio is good, 1.62 versus a forecast of 1.62. And it's only down a little bit from what we budgeted. The debt service ratio, good, 1.86. Capital coverage ratio, it's good to see this one has now gotten above 1.19. We think we'll be 1.36. And we said 1.06, and that reflects all the work we did to try to get enough capital built into the rate structure. And unrestricted cash on hand of 210 days, that's climbed upward from what we're forecasting, down a little bit from budget, and there are no invested balances on the books right now. This was kind of the dashboards. You can see where we've gone from $9.3 million to 15.3 over the last couple, well, I'll call it the last 5-year period. In suburban water reflected some of the rate increases and the one that were built into the budget this year. Operating income has climbed to $2.3 million from the 846 way back in 2018. Net income has gone from 1.8 to 2.1 over the years. Net cash available for capital has gone to 2.8. And if you look, it was on the negative side back in 2018. Debt service coverage ratio, well, we were at 1.37 back in 2018. It's kind of gone upwards to 2.01, reflecting the pay-go, reflecting the rate increase in there. And on the capital spending, kind of ups and downs, 4.3 to 8.8, and then kind of slid back down again, 5.36, and then 5.5. So higher than it's been since 2019. Wastewater. Again, some increases over the years, not much. On this inventory side, only 2%. So we're at 20 million, but that compares to like 14 million back in 2018. Operating income, we're up almost at $1 million. We think we're going to hit 1.6 this year. We compare that to the first 3 years, it was on the negative side. Net income, $1.8 million, and that's a big swing from where we were in 2018, where that was negative as well. Net cash available for capital is 7.2, up a little bit from last year, kind of down a little bit from 2019. Our biggest year was almost $9 million in 2019, but Obviously, much better than where we were in 2018 at 3.1. Debt service coverage ratio, 10.82. There's just not a lot of debt in this one compared to the other ones. Capital spending, again, we're 3.7 this year versus 2.9. Again, indicative of some of the 537 work that is still out there to be planned. On the city side, way back in 2018, we were about $35 million. With some of the increases over the years, we're at $46.4 million now. And we were aided this year also by a higher CPI index as well. So operating income, nice trend here from almost $12 million to 19 million. Net income, we think we're going to hit on the positive side this year, and we're going to better that in 2022. Net cash available for capital, wow, you got to go almost less than $2 million in 2018, and that went down in 19, and now almost $11.3 million cash available to use in capital, and that's where all the capital spending is coming from. Debt service coverage ratio, 1.86. We've hovered from 1.6 to 1.86. A little bit of dip in 2020. And again, capital spending, 2 years where it was low, 2 more years, 2018 and 20, where 7.8, 8.3, and we're up to $11.3 million in this budget.
Excuse me. Hey, Ed. Ted here. Now, I have a question / comment. Looking at the 2022 budget for the city division, I see that we have debt service of $15,460,000. Is that correct?
Yes, that sounds right. Yes.
How much of that debt service is due to the debt incurred by the takeover of the city by the suburban district, i.e. required to pay off the pension problems in the city of Allentown?
How much?
The reason I ask this is because when people talk about rates and water rates, a big thing we're carrying around in our back is the paying off of that debt that was the reason for the concession. And I think it's important that we have that number handy in case we ever get in a discussion about why the rates in Allentown are X, Y, or Z.
So the debt service itself is not broken out into the different uses of the funds.
I know.
But generally speaking, we took a little over $3 million worth of bonds to fund the lease, and about $35 million, so a little more than 10% of that, was used for capital improvements, and the rest of it was used to fund the lease itself, to pay the city payment and do all the things with the transition that were needed. So 90% of the debt is related directly to paying the upfront payment to the city.
So you're talking about the $35 million that was originally borrowed on the first go around. That was for I'll call it the specified capital projects out there. Yeah. And then the rest of it was 300 million rounded was just for the concession assets, so to speak.
Yeah, I guess what I'm asking is what would the city rates in Allentown be without having to pull that deal off to essentially pay off the pension obligations? I don't need it right now, but I just think it's a
I gotta work that.
Yeah.
I think your point is well taken, though, Ted, where, I mean, the vast majority of the $15.5 million of debt service that we're going to pay in 2022 is not related to water and sewer. It's related to this upfront payment that we made to the city. So if we remove that $15.5 million from our expense, then the rates would look a lot different.
That's my point. Thank you.
Yeah, but I would have to run some numbers to get an exact percentage. And
Well, I think we all forget that I believe a tendency, all of us, to forget collectively that chunk of obligation that the water and sewer rates are taking on. That is certainly a non-business related expense. But that's
fair
the way you
question.
do-
No, it's a fair question. I'll run some numbers and I'll be happy to tell you what that is.
And actually, if you're building on what Ted said, if you look at those charts, assuming the budget, 2022 budget is close to what reality ends up being, it's a pretty good story. Actually, if you go over the 5 years with the settlement and everything taken in hand, that reflects some responsible management, I think.
Yeah, we'll take a look. No problem.
So today's presentation is really just the final review and summary of all the discussions we've had over the last 2-3 months. And we do have a budget approval deadline of November 1st, which is next Monday. So if there are any changes that we need to make them quickly. Otherwise, we are asking for for board approval of the budget today. And then we'll be back to you next month with the specific details of the rates that feed into the budget. So, further question or discussion? Thank you for your attention.
So how are we going to include that requirement that we put for the 2 position opening in the budget before we vote? I'm just trying to see how to incorporate that, because if you vote what you presented, it means that we approve everything. So we asked that we put a placeholder for those positions till you come back with better definitions of the organizational chart and all that.
I think that as a board member, you can make that motion as specific as you'd like to make it. And I think that when we had spoken last, you were talking about asset management and process improvement as the 2 positions you were most concerned about. And if you wanted to specify that in a motion to approve.
That's fine.
Okay.
Do you want to have that? I'm happy just with your word that when that time comes that that you'll present that information to us so that we have better confidence in the, adding the money. Do you want to have that in the motion? If you want to make a motion, you can make a motion.
Well, wouldn't it be easier to approve the budget and then have a second motion that money not to be spent towards those positions until it's reviewed further by the board? Wouldn't that be?
Yeah, I'd prefer that just to keep the budget
That's
clean.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
That's the reason we have a lawyer.
So you're suggesting 2 motions?
2 motions, a clean approval on the budget and then
I'm fine.
the specific motion on the use of funds for the position.
I don't make motions. I'm waiting.
A motion to approve the
Okay.
budget for 2022.
I'll second.
Okay, motion made by Amir and seconded by Linda to approve the budget as presented. Any questions? All in favor? Let's do a roll call on that.
I thought you might like to do a roll call on that one. All right, so this is on the motion to approve the 2022 budget. Mr. Brian Noggle.
Yes.
Scott Bieber.
Yes.
Richard Bonner.
Yes.
Norma Cusick.
Yes.
Ted Lyons.
Yes.
Ken Baker.
Yes.
Linda Rosenfeld.
Yes.
Jeff Morgan.
Yes.
Peter Camilli.
Yes.
Thank you. 9.
Okay,
Yes,
motion
votes.
passes. Congratulations on the 2022 budget.
See, that's why I
nice
went
work.
full attire. I knew this was
Yes.
going to be good.
That helped me with the vote. Great work for you and your team and for staff, the rest of the staff for all the support.
Thank you. They put a lot of work into it. So,
It takes a long time. And, well, now, we have another request for a motion.
Yeah. The motion would be that the the funds not be spent on the new positions added to the staffing through the 2022 budget until further approval of the board.
Do you want them approval or review? And do you want to be specific about which positions?
This is for just process improvement and for the asset management, for those positions.
So what we're looking for is a presentation by staff to delineate the value to be obtained by spending that much money for those two positions.
Right.
That would be the motion.
Is that clear enough for you, Lisa? That motion?
Yeah.
Any additional thoughts on that?
So essentially, the motion is that the funds not be spent for filling the process improvement and asset management positions until a presentation given by staff regarding the details of those positions. Something
Right.
I mean, in reality, yourself, you're not going to go start hiring till you know what is that role of individual is and how it fits in your organization. So you have to do that homework anyway.
Yeah.
So our request is that when you finish that homework, coming to the board and getting the board input before we move forward. So we are not delaying, per se, where direction you're going. We just have another gauge review. That's it, so to speak.
And this all came out of the strategic plan which will be approved later on this year.
Yes.
And it wasn't fully vetted out at that time for talking about the value. So looking for additional information at the time for moving forward. So, okay, good. So I heard a motion.
Make the motion.
Need a second?
Second.
Seconded by Kevin. Amir made the motion. We'll do a roll call on this.
Okay, this is a roll call on the motion regarding funds not being spent for filling the process improvement and asset management positions until a presentation is provided by the staff regarding the details of those positions. Made by Amir, seconded by Kevin. Brian Noggle.
Yes.
Scott Bieber.
Yes.
Dick Bonner.
Yes.
Norman Cusick.
Yes.
Ted Lyons.
Yes.
Ken Baker.
Yes.
Linda Rosenfeld.
Yes.
Jeff Morgan.
Yes.
Mayor Camille.
Yes.
Thank you. It's 9 yes votes.
Okay, super. All right, moving on.
Thank you very much.
Thank you again for all the work that you and the staff have done on presenting the budget and on the strategic plan too. More to come. Okay, moving on now to monthly financial review. September board was attached. Digital board package was pages 14 through 23.
Right, we have another presentation for Ed to run through. And I should mention that these presentations were also emailed out to the board and posted online for anyone who is not able to screen share with us today.
Okay, so this is what our financial results in September were. We're looking right now at just for the month. Suburban Water actually finished on the positive side and was better than forecast. And I'm looking at income. Wastewater actually was negative and a little bit off the forecast by about $8,000, so not too bad. City division was positive, almost $1.5 million, and that was better than forecast. So altogether, LCA finished with $1.3 million in net income versus $1.2 million of forecast. So we were 171 plus better than forecast in total. Cash flows, water was negative, almost 92 million. Wastewater was negative 565,000. And the city division ended up with almost $3.1 million of cash. That leaves LCA with $2.4 million after you consider the two negatives. But the good news was they were all favorable to forecast. Water was better by 410,000, wastewater better by 60, and city division by 262. So even with the negatives, we still finished better than forecast by 732,000. Debt service coverage ratio in a monthly basis is subject to spending timing. So actually more pertinent is the year-to-date number. So looking at year-to-date in the income statement side, Suburban Water was positive, good, 614,000, but it's a little bit below forecast by 214,000. Suburban Wastewater was at $1.5 million. We're off to forecast by about 763 year-to-date. City division, almost $4.8 million. And that was $284,000 better than forecast. So as you look at total LCA on the income statement, we're 6.9 versus 7.6. So we're off about 693,000. Cash flows. All three funds, water, wastewater, and city division. City division had a nice cash flow month, year to date of 11.3. So altogether, LCA is almost $12 million of cash year to date. The good news also is that compared to forecast, water was better by 410, wastewater by 165, and city division 262,000. So altogether, LCA is up to forecast by 838,000. On debt service coverage ratio, water is at 1.49. We forecasted 1.55, so it was 0.06 below. Wastewater is 9.35. We thought we'd be at 10.74, so that's off 1.39. But city division is 2.03 versus 2.01, so actually 0.02 on the positive side there. Okay, so let's looking at year to date and some of the major factors affecting income and cash flows. Again, Suburban Water starting with first, and net income was better than zero, so that's good. However, it was lower than forecast. Got a couple things going on. Got operating revenues were slightly higher, and operating expenses more than offset that. Because we had higher labor costs charged in and higher spending on services. So that resulted in another operating profit that was slightly better than forecast. And that was driven by the expense variance. And higher financial expenses, that's interest expense related and lower interest income. So we finished lower than forecast in net income. On cash flows, better, surplus, it was better than forecast. We more than offset the lower net operating profit that we just talked about above with favorable working capital effects, lower debt service, and lower capital spending. Again, and all of that offsets some of the higher financial expenses, which is a low dollar amount, but it was unfavorable. So cash flows were good. Looking at Suburban Wastewater, net income was better than zero. It was lower than forecast, and unfortunately, we got some red going on here. Operating revenues were lower on lower municipal charges. The operating expenses were higher on a higher treatment and transportation volume effect. So net operating profit was lower on a combination of the operating revenues being down and the operating expenses being up. The financial expenses, again, interest income, not as good as we thought, and the interest expense was up just a little bit. So on the income side, they were a little bit worse than forecast. Cash flows. Better, it's a surplus, it's better than forecast. And essentially you got a kind of offsetting things. You had lower net operating profit, but we had a favorable working capital effect that kind of made that better. Then slightly higher debt service and offset by lower CapEx, even though there was lower interest income. So it kind of had a couple of things playing against each other. Let me get to city. I like this one. Net income was better than zero, was better than forecast. Operating revenues were up on higher user charges and higher tapping fees. Operating expenses were lower on lower personnel costs. So that meant that net operating profit was higher than forecast. That's the combination of higher operating expenses along with higher operating revenues with lower operating expenses. And actually the financial expenses on this one were better than forecast. So equating all that to cash flows means we did well to surplus, better than forecast, higher net operating profit, small favorable working capital effect, and lower capex offset some of the lower interest income. So the city came out looking better than the other two. This is operating revenues. On the suburban water side, we were at 9.8 versus 9.8, kind of rounded. So not bad. We think we'll finish the year at 13.3 versus 12.7. And the forecast numbers that are up there are pretty much the same forecast that you had seen in all our budget presentations as well. Suburban water is looking good for the year. And in terms of wastewater, 14.4 versus 14.7, so down a little bit for year to date. But however, we think we'll be at 20.9 versus 20.0, so that's good. And on the city side, year to date, we're at 34.8 versus 34.6. So that's a little positive variance. And we think we'll finish at 46.2 versus 46. So that's good news. Okay, this would be operating expenses. We're year to date at 8.059 versus 8.042, so not bad variance there. We think we'll be at 11.0 versus 11.2, so we'll be better than forecast for the year. Suburban wastewater, we're at 12.8 versus 12.3, up year to date. And we think we're going to finish the year at 19.5 versus 18.9. And some of that is driven by, I'll call it, higher expense capex is driving some of that and higher depreciation. City side, 17.6 year to date versus 17.6 plus. So year to date, we're better than forecast. And the city is at 28.6 versus 27.8 in terms of operating expenses. And that's pretty much driven by higher depreciation as well.
Might be able to drag it to the right-hand side.
Yeah, I'm trying to get this top bar to go away, but.
That's all right. These look like Capex.
Yeah, this doesn't drag.
Right.
Maybe if I just cleared this chat message. That's from Linda saying she has to leave. There we go. That one did the trick.
I was right. It was Capex. Just kidding. So 2.1 year to date versus 2.3 rounded. So we're a little bit behind on the suburban water side. We think the year will be 3.6 versus 4.2. Wastewater, we're 2.4 versus 2.7. Again, a little bit behind. So favorable spending variance. We think we'll be at 3.7 versus 3.9. So a little bit of favorable variance. And on the city side, 3.9 year to date versus 3.9. We're kind of a little bit higher actually. And we think we're going to be 8.3 versus 8.9 in terms of total capital spend. This was, again, I introduced this the last time, and I use it for forecasting variances, mostly to see if we've got a major swing either on the positive side and or in the negative side. And we've got some that are really close and got some things in CAPEX that we'll have to look at again, I think, as we're getting into the last couple months. It doesn't, debt service is a little bit hard at times because it's a very low number, and if you have 50,000 variance, you're throwing it off. So, and we had some tapping fees that came in a year to date that we just didn't have in the forecast. So that throws the non-operating income number out as well. But use it to see where we need to focus some time and attention on our forecasting abilities.
Hey, Ed, it's Jeff. Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
So in this table here, the CapEx, that number is the monthly spending on capital projects that you do?
It's the year-to-date number compared to forecast.
Okay.
So, good.
I was gonna say, you accumulate those monthly, because there's other reports that give us monthly CapEx
Yeah,
numbers.
Yeah, pretty much what you see in terms of the major KPIs is a year-to-date number, so it's accumulated on a monthly basis to a year-to-date number.
Okay, and the debt service, like on the bonds, that's usually just paid semi-annually or annually?
Some of them are paid monthly, some of them are paid quarterly, and some of them are paid semi-annually.
Okay, so you just...
It's a combination of all of the above.
Okay, so you just accumulate those as we go, but so for example, the first quarter of the year, the number could be really low because there's a semi-annual payment that's coming in October, right?
Correct.
Okay. All right.
This is really, like I said, it's for actually the accounting crew and myself to sit there and go, we might need to take a little bit different approach to what we're doing with some of these.
Yeah, I just wanted to understand how you come up with cash flow. It's still my simple brain. I just need to figure it out.
Oh, yeah.
So
Good question.
All right, thank you.
Okay, operating ratio. This one's got depreciation in. We're at 1.22 versus a 1.13 and 1. That's good. Again, on suburban wastewater, 1.13 versus 1.06 and 1. Another good story. City, 1.98 versus 1.66. Nice gap there versus 1. So altogether, LCA is at 1.54 versus 1.36 and 1. This takes out depreciation. So if you're good with depreciation in, you ought to be even better without it. And we are across the board, 1.61 on suburban water, and that's all better than the other, than the budget and internal target. Suburban wastewater, 1.55, again, better than budget of 1.41 and internal target of 1.3. 2.65 versus 2.1 and 1.15. Again, all good news. And for LCA in total, 2.07 versus 1.76 and 1.2. So good news. The debt service coverage ratio, 1.49 is certainly better than the budget of 1.20 and our target. Wastewater at 9.35 is better than the budget of 8.17, certainly better than target of 1.2. Cities at 2.03 versus 1.62 and 1.2, which is the covenant. So altogether, LCA is at 2.23 versus 1.80 and 1.20. Unrestricted days cash on hand, almost 349 days in suburban water, 209.2 in wastewater, and I think we're at 170 in the city. That number's getting gumbled up a little bit. So it was just off a little bit to our target. The only, I guess the comment I can make at that forecast is what you have seen in the budget. We have not wavered from that. We will probably take another shot at forecast now with a couple months remaining. So now that we have the budget approved, we can jumble up the numbers on you. And we'll take another look at what's going to happen in October, November, and December. And the only other thing I could say is compared to budget, looking pretty good. Cash flow statement. The only one that's on the negative side is the city at 1.6. And that's because we took out $2 million worth of money that we thought we were going to borrow for the VFTs. That's now in the 2022 budget. Any questions?
Question, what is the value of the asset that we have on the books for LCA? The value of the assets.
Value of the total assets?
I mean, is it 100 million, 50 million?
200 million.
200 million.
200.
Okay. This is not included the city, or that included the city too? Is the city asset included in our asset or not? No.
No.
The physical assets of the city division are not.
No.
included in our
Okay, no.
assets. Right.
I was
It
trying to
has
get to
$200 million worth of asset in the books.
$200 million, and no, the assets from the city are still maintained on their books. We just have I'll call it a value on the books for it.
Okay.
Any other questions on the financial report? Looks very favorable compared to other years. Thank you.
Not bad.
Moving on, monthly system operations overview for September.
Yeah, hello, everyone. This is the monthly report for September 2021. We'll start with water like we always do. You'll notice some of the numbers are starting to show the transition from summer to fall. The Allentown water demand was 21.84 MGD, which was our lowest since April. Sean Spring was the highest flow since April as well, mostly thanks to 8+ inches of rain that we had last month, which we will discuss further in a few minutes. Suburban water also saw the typical fall decrease to 11.29 MGD. This again, lowest since April that we've seen. Some of the reasons for the fall decline: nobody's watering their grass in their gardens anymore, or at least very, very limited. People aren't washing their cars, and their pools are probably closed by now and not being used. So there's a substantial reduction once we get out of the summer months. Moving forward, precipitation totals 8.12 inches last month. Going down to SSOs and bypasses, we had 12, which was over half of our total from the entire year. We'll talk about that in a second. If we move down to significant repairs and upgrades, we had a major belt press failure late in September, where a previously repaired breakage occurred on the belt for a second time, causing the belt to be pulled into the auger screw, which then led to the auger screw becoming bent. And there was a couple chain reactions that happened that had to be fixed. We didn't have any backlog sludge because we utilized all the other two presses for the week that was involved between the time it broke, number 3 broke, and the time number 3 was repaired. Total cost for the repair, believe it or not, we did a lot of the work internally. There was some work by Blooming Glen contractors, but the total cost for the repair was only about $13,000. So we were very happy with that. And again, there was a lot of internal work that caused this number to be so low. Description of the NOVs and SSOs last month. Between September 1st and September 7th, there were 8 SSOs that were recorded, including 5 in the Western Lehigh manholes. Heidelberg Wastewater Treatment Plant Equalization Tank had 1. Wynwood Primary Lift Station Wet Well had 1. and the wastewater treatment plant equalization tank, also at Wynwood, had a SSO. Between 9/1 and 9/13, there were 4 plant bypasses, 2 at Heidelberg Heights, September 1st to the 4th, and again on September 9th, 13th. Lynn Township wastewater treatment plant had one from 9/1 to 9/4, pardon me, and Klein's Island had one on 9/1. 3 of the 4 bypasses resulted from excessive rains from tropical storm Ida. I had mentioned under other highlights last month, we were working on 19th Ward water storage tank for internal repairs and remediation. That work is done. All the testing has been done, but we are currently waiting for our VOC results. So when we get those back, assuming they pass, which we are pretty confident they will, we'll be getting that tank online, hopefully within a few days. And that is essentially the report from September of 2021.
Thanks, John. Any questions?
John, do you guys understand the reason of the belt failure for second time?
Apparently, from what we could tell, the seam that was patched caught on one of the fixtures of the press, and it just pulled it loose again. And by the time the operator caught it to shut it down, it had basically wrapped itself around some of the machinery and pulled itself into the auger screw and just started bending things. So as far as we know, that's what happened. It failed at the same place.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah. Hey, John, it's Jeff. How old are the belt presses?
We did a major job in 2014. One press was totally rehabilitated at the manufacturer and was brought in and replaced our oldest unit. And the other 2 belt presses were totally rehabbed on site. So they're still rebuilds, but they're still from 2014. So they're pretty new.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Okay, thanks, Sean.
Sure.
Staff comments,
I have no comments today.
solicitor comments,
No comments.
any public comments on any topics?
No comment.
Thank you, Ron. All right, we have no need for an executive session, so at this time, we are going to adjourn the meeting. Thank you, everybody, for your participation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.